You are now listening to Asking for a Friend with TalkDoc, sharing insights through real, honest, and practical ways to improve your communication and relationships. Featuring your hosts, Dr. Pamela Kreiser, Meredith Edwards Nagel, and Teighlor Polendo.
We have a great episode for you related to those relationships that you want to keep. When we think about those relationships, one of the things that we find that people struggle with is our tendency to highlight in our conversations the difference that we have with other people around us. And we might highlight those differences more than we highlight the common ground. Sometimes that's politics, that's everyday interaction, could be any kind of social issue. But we live in a world where social division is actually valued. We spend a lot of time talking about how we're different from each other. But this episode is about, what if we didn't do that? What if we decided to focus on what we have in common and try to get a better understanding rather than focusing on differences? So in this episode, we want to talk about the ways that we speak and the ways that we think about our differences so that we can bring ourselves together, bridge the gaps, create more connection. Now, in order to do this, we want to talk about a couple of tools. So we're going to talk about finding commonalities, and we're also going to talk about different ways that we can actually technically put messages together so that we can understand what those commonalities are. These are tools that everyone should have in their toolbox. And whether you're in a close relationship or not, these are tools that really could be applied everywhere. But like I said, we want to focus on the relationships we want to keep. So we want to think about building our toolbox so that we can figure out ways to come together more than emphasize our differences. Let's face it, we're emotional people who sometimes think.
Dr.
Right?
K-ism.
Yes. And because we're emotional people, I think sometimes we'll hear a different point of view than ours, and we'll rush into maybe an emotional reaction that could be defensive or could be anything that separates us. Our instinct is to focus on where we disagree rather than what we share, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So we might hear something that's a little bit different and just think maybe quickly an emotional thought that isn't actually the rational thing behind what we're talking about. Let's do an example. Yeah. Let's say your friend invites you over for dinner and your friend says, I want you to come at 8. And you immediately think to yourself, no, I want to come at 6. I don't want to come at 8. That's way too late. I don't want to eat that late. And maybe you even say some things to yourself. Why do we always have to do it her way? Or why don't I ever get what I want? Or why do I have to always eat late when we get together? I might immediately start thinking all kinds of separating ideas. The point, though, is that if we applied rational concepts to it, we could actually find some common ground there. Very obviously, the common ground is that we want to be spending time together. But that's not actually what we're focusing on. So part of what's commonalities is saying, hey, let's stop those emotional reactions for a second and start thinking about the actual commonality that we share. We're friends. We're trying to spend time together because we like being together. And I know we don't agree about 6 or 8, but we should start with focusing on the fact that we have this common ground. That kind of lays the groundwork there.
And it's important to find this common ground because it's about creating more closeness with relationships you want to keep.
Absolutely. But I do think that you and I can actually get into a full-blown argument over a minute difference that is actually fighting over a commonality. I could get into a really big argument with you about why 6 o'clock is so much better. And it's silly that we do that, honestly.
Yeah.
So we could think of a few more examples. Have you ever had differences in where you plan to go on vacation?
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Or just wanting to do something, whether it's location, I think location, or I want to lounge, or I want to adventure. I want to,
You could want to be lounging around and your partner might say, oh, I want to do activities. I want to be doing something that's very active. And you could decide not to go on the vacation, right? I mean, that's what people do sometimes. They just go, we can't agree, so we're not going.
Okay, so I have an exact example of this. Literally, my husband and I were like, if you could snap your fingers and we could do anything for vacation the first time without the kids, what would we do? Let's have it be 4 days. And I said that the first 2 days, I wanted to be so physically exhausted. I want to hike and do hard things that I can't do enjoyably with little people. And then the last 2 days, I want to do absolutely nothing and get a massage and just eat good food. And he was like, wow, that first part Wow, I don't know about that. Like that the point was to relax. But but this is exactly the point of what you're saying. So in that example, the great part of that conversation we were able to come to was that the point was we actually wanted to spend the 4 days together. I didn't want to be away from him for the 4 days.
Because that's the worst scenario, right? Where he says, if you could snap your fingers, and you're like, I would be alone at a mountain retreat and you would not be there.
I could take 1 day of that, but I'm not going to lie. But the point was that we wanted the vacation. We were dreaming of doing something together.
Yeah. And so it sounds like you had a productive conversation.
Oh, yeah.
The point that we were bringing up is I don't know that we do characteristically do that in all our relationships. And so that's the challenge for this episode, to think through, are there relationships that you have, the ones you want to keep, where you're forcing difference where it doesn't need to be happening?
Can you say that again? Because I think that's what I'm worried about in this conversation, and what I know is happening a lot around us is you said we're forcing the difference.
Yeah.
You think?
No, I think we are. I think we're making choices in whether it's our thinking pattern or our speech patterns, and we're forcing the emphasis of our differences rather than our commonalities. Even when you think about politics, and I'm not going to get into politics here, but doesn't everyone want a good president?
This is what I mean by I feel like this is dangerous because it's
not a political podcast.
No, I know that. But in this subject of communication, of finding commonalities, I think there's been this praise of being so against each other. And how do we use commonalities to overcome that, especially in that arena, or in even, I think, a religious, or this could be a myriad of things. But I feel that there's just been this praise, whether it's been by social media or news, that in daily conversation, of wanting to be so different, but then we forget we're in community with each other.
And I would also add that I think our society rewards difference more than commonalities.
Okay.
Think about news stories that you hear. The news story is not, we're all the same, we want to have thriving families, and we want to have good weather. And the stock market's the same. That's not what it says. It says the stock market moved 10 points. Oh my gosh. And the weather's coming in, it's going to drop 10 degrees. And it's always difference in the headlines. We don't publish studies, even academically, showing that people are the same. We publish stories that say men do this more than women, or this happens more often for people who stonewall than that, or this happens to people who like boundaries more. It's always the sensation of the day in American society is to showcase difference, for sure.
Do you think because it elicits some type of chaos that we don't want to admit we're searching for, instead of peace, which would be to connect with each other?
I don't think we're searching for chaos.
No.
I think there's some people that are.
Yeah.
If we're talking about the fight, then we're not actually progressing in any kind of way.
So I have a question for you, Teighlor, because I was thinking of family gatherings, and you have a lot of those family gatherings, and you talk about those family gatherings. So how does it go?
Which family are we talking about?
Yeah, immediately.
Well, I think about your larger family holiday plans, and I think, do you emphasize that you want to all be together, or is there more of an emphasis on, oh, I wanted to be a formal dinner, and I wanted it to be a picnic, and I wanted it to be games?
I initially thought the same thing. I was thinking about my family, and how when you talked about saying, why do we always have to do it for that person? You make exceptions or changes. And how do we get so lost? The point is to gather, right? And instead it's, we always have to accommodate this person, and they're always late, and they won't drive to us. We have to go to them. And I get so caught. Why do they always want to change the plans? They invite people to something, and then they have to add 10 things to it. I wanted to do an appetizer competition once. Full-blown fights. Well, if you're going to spend more money on your appetizer, then I have to spend more money on. And I was like, the point was to eat good food and make it fun. That's why I did a competition. And now we're out for blood, and it's who's going to spend more money, and I don't want to participate. And if you're going to do it, gets so quickly turned. And yeah, we play a lot of games. So the competition, I don't know. What was your question? It goes horribly.
I was thinking of another example would be a family struggling with the format of their gathering, not focusing on the gathering.
Yeah, no, happens all the time. And we're trying to plan my dad's birthday, and I asked him what he wanted to do. I'm like, okay, great. Tell the siblings. And then next thing I get a call from my dad and he's, oh, new plan. We're doing this. And I was like, I asked you what you wanted to do. I know this is now a siblings plan.
Yeah.
How did that happen on your birthday? I'm like, Dad, I'll do whatever you want, but what the fuck? Why do we accommodate the sibling?
Interesting.
Yeah. And I do. I don't even think my dad doesn't care what we do. He just wants to be with his kids. I instantly go to, I got to fight this sibling. How dare they insert themselves in changing a plan?
So this is a good episode for you, Teighlor.
It's so good. It's so good because I instantly just nitpick the stupid little details that do not matter.
So how do we start with doing the bridge in this moment?
Let's talk about one more scenario because I think one other place where this might show up might be in the workplace.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think sometimes about some coworkers I've had, or maybe you have some coworkers where you have wanted to do something a little differently. And focusing on that, you're smiling, Teighlor.
Just because this is so applicable to my job, our job's pretty simple. Get people in a seatbelt, pour them a drink, open the door, get them out. But the million different ways to do that, I've seen people literally fight over how a cart gets set up. We're just going to pass out drinks. It's really not a big deal. And we all just want to finish this job quickly so we can all go eat our lunch.
Yeah.
People care. People really care that they have a way to do it. And it's the right way, even though there is no way to do it, right?
Yeah, there's no right way. That's the only way.
It's like we're just passing out drinks, but this one happens a lot at my job.
So then what's the commonality?
That we just want to get the work done.
Get the work done. Maybe do a good job too.
Sure.
Okay.
A smile on someone's face. I don't know.
So I think about that, but I think sometimes, so this is a good example.
Teighlor is so spicy. Sure.
We know that. We already knew that though.
We're going to send it to your employer. I think sometimes we can get lost in the details of that in any kind of work situation and say, I want to do master planning first. Oh, I want to do the spreadsheet first, or whatever it is on the project.
Yeah.
I like what you said about there being a right way. So the right time to eat dinner is 6 o'clock, not 8 o'clock, because that's better for digestion. You can get into that kind of thinking.
Yeah, it's
true.
And we can convince ourselves, especially in the workplace, I think maybe we might do that, where we'd say, oh, there is a way to set up the cart when you're a flight attendant. And there will be a good way to do that.
Yeah.
And I think that's where we waste a lot of time.
If you're fighting over it, for sure.
Yeah. A lot of words are wasted where it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
How do we get to the point where we can vocalize the bridge or find the common ground with each other? Because even just in the drama of these stories, we get caught up in the wheel of it all.
Sure. I think it's stopping what we're doing wrong and starting to do it right. So what do we need to
There is
stop?
a right and a wrong way.
Well, because I think that speech and thinking are related. When we speak in certain ways, that our thinking matches that. And we've talked about that some on the podcast, that thinking and speech are highly correlated. And that means that when I speak the words of difference, I think difference. And when I speak words of commonality, I think commonality. I can, with my speech, emphasize differences, or I can highlight connection. It's a choice that I have with my language. An example would be when you and I are in a conversation and I say, I want this, you want that, and we're just not going to go on vacation, or we're just not going to be able to agree on this. I'm highlighting that versus if I use words like we and us and start with the commonality. Because I think what happens is people get up in arms over the I want this, you want that, and we don't agree. And as soon as I say that to someone, they think, yeah, we don't agree. Why are you trying to do it your way? I want to do it my way. And we're just promoting that kind of separate thinking. If I approach it differently and say, I want us to have dinner and let's figure out a way for us to spend our time together, or let's figure out a great way to get this project done that's very efficient, or let's figure out a vacation that is really workable for both of us. If we start from that point and talk about we and us, we have a much better shot at the thinking being about we and us.
Yes. Yeah.
So one parent says private school, the other one says homeschool.
Yeah.
You could, in each conversation about this, start with, I want this and you want that. I want homeschool, you want private, or whatever.
Okay.
Instead, the concept is to start with, okay, so we want to have a conversation about the schooling. I know we both value really good education for our children. Then we start the conversation.
Oh, so doing this at the jump is what is important.
Yes.
Is that what I just...
We're previewing the goals, or we're previewing, that's what the commonality is.
The point, what I'm getting is at the start of the interaction, if you create this connection, if you make the bridge, then you're typically poised or in a position that's less defensive or less wanting to separate because you feel like the other person is on the same page as you or going at the topic with you, not all already starting against you. Is that what I'm getting? Okay, I'm learning.
But it's not to say, let's say the child going to school, that is going to be a conversation filled with differences. So it's not to say that we're not going to talk about the difference at all, or
it's not that we're not talking about the differences, but we do want to emphasize the things that we agree on. So you might agree that you want to have a safe environment for your child, that you want it to be a nutritious environment for your child, and saying there's a lot that we agree on, but we're spending too much time talking about what we don't agree on, and we're starting the conversation with it. Mm-hmm. When I square off with you minute 1, what's minute 10 like? What's minute 20 like? It's the boxing gloves.
Yeah. Okay. That's, to me, what I just heard, why this matters. What you just said right there. Because how quickly nothing can turn into something. But if we start it in a way that's more connecting, it's actually connecting each other on a common goal. Then when we do naturally human have disagreements about things, we still revert back to that moment a few minutes ago, which was what our goal is the same. So we're not actually fighting each other, but we're still trying to get somewhere together.
But that's my question, because it feels a little bit of rose-colored glasses, just a little not authentic if you don't bring up any disagreement.
It doesn't mean you don't have disagreement. It means you're not highlighting it and emphasizing it going into the conversation. When I go into conversations, I'm a lot wiser if I focus on the commonalities than if I go into those conversations focusing on the differences. Now, I've been married 35 years, and we actually truly agree on the big things, which are the commonalities. But we can fight like hell about the little things. Absolutely. So the reason this tool is important to me is I've learned that I don't need to do that meaningless fighting. We agree on the big things.
Okay.
And when big things happen, we agree even more, I think, on those big things. The point is that you want to decide, how are you going to approach this conversation? And why are you starting with difference? Why are you not starting with similarity? And it's not about being soft or not talking about difficult things, but why are we leaving the commonalities out? Even in that conversation about, I want to go to the mountains and you want to go to the beach for vacation. Oh, so we're just not going? We could just basically square off on that and never go on vacation.
Married people talk like this a lot.
They do on certain things. But why are we not talking about a vacation that we both need and we actually both want?
It sounds like the met need of wanting the connection in there to begin with is not present, maybe.
It's not focused on and it's not acknowledged, but it would sure help. Now, we should talk with you about money.
Oh, great. Yeah. Why not? Okay.
So somebody wants to stick to the budget, and then somebody wants to enjoy their life and doesn't want to be bound to the budget, right? And if that's going on, I could start our conversation with, I know you're a crazy spender and I'm the responsible one, but we need to talk about money. Notice I've squared us off in certain corners.
I think that's exactly the phrase that I'm highlighting here, is you're saying this is a square off moment. If you find yourself ready to go with somebody, maybe that's the conversation you need to think about the commonality before you start. It almost would ease your own right hook a little bit.
I love that. Before you're approaching this difficult topic, get with yourself for a second and say, wait, where do we already agree though?
Yeah.
Do we have some shared parts here that are common ground?
It's disarming in a way.
So we had the tool of finding the common ground, starting the conversation with what brings us together, changing our words from I and me to we and us.
Okay.
So then there's also going to be times where we have actually true difference, right?
Okay.
So then the next thing to talk about is a different tool, which we call a two-way commonality statement. And a two-way commonality statement is a message structure that says, is there a way for party A to have X and party B to have Y? So then the question would be, is there a way for you, Meredith, to have your physical activity and luxury, and a way for your spouse to also have the relaxation they want?
So like a win.
Win meets some compromise?
It's not about compromising. This tool is
No.
not that.
Okay.
Okay, so we want both people to win.
Is there a way for everyone to accomplish what they want?
Okay. My example was perfect. It's half and half. I would go for 1 day, 3 days. That's fine.
But
That's
is there a
amazing.
vacation that, because the question would be, is there a vacation then that we can pick that will satisfy both conditions?
Oh, totally.
So that's what we're thinking about, rather than saying, I have to have those things. Because again, we go into that conversation with demands, which isn't helpful to a close relationship, to go into a conversation with demands, right?
Mhm.
Instead, thinking, is there a way for us both to have this win? Is there a way for us to get both of what we want? So let's talk about a couple examples.
Okay.
I work with college students. They have roommate situations, right?
Mhm.
And one common conflict is somebody wants a place to study and to have the place be quiet, and the other person wants to have a party. And they're incompatible in that
Mhm.
way.
Mhm.
So we would say there's true difference there. If we were applying the tool, we'd say, is there a way for this roommate to have time to study, but also a way for you to have the party? In other words, is there a way for both goals to be met? And then you'd be thinking about solutions that way. The
Okay.
reason this is important is that there isn't a winner. And I know we're all competitive on here. So we're
It's
like,
like we're all going to really struggle with.
I don't like this tool because there's no winner, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but the idea is that you're not going in saying, I want my way, or you can't come to the apartment because I have to study, or we're having a party and I don't care if you fail your test. Those are all selfish points of view where I'm going to win or you're going to win.
Mhm.
And this, like you said, Teighlor, is a way for us to win. So let's do another example.
Okay, yeah. Okay,
a
so
neighborhood.
we have an example where you can, if you're in a community, in a neighborhood, even think of an HOAs, I think this happens with, right?
Yeah.
Or difference, where people want new developments or new ideas to come
Mhm.
forward, but then there's groups that want to preserve old ways of doing things or historic charm, right? So then you would
Yeah.
ask, right, is there a way for us to welcome new development while also preserving the
Mhm.
history or the old way of doing something?
Right.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So I guess that the helpful point of that is the goal is that it's shifting a conversation from the verses into valuing different ideas.
And
right?
is there a way to do them both? Which I think is the biggest part of it. Can we do both things? Does it have to be you or me? Does it always have to be one person wins?
Which sort of touches on that dangerous topic you were talking about earlier, which is the solutions that blend progress with tradition, right? How are
Okay.
we able to do that? This is on a very small scale. I feel like HOAs, it's a good one to practice if you have an HOA, you think, if you're in a meeting and picturing this happening.
No, but I think that if we use this tool, is there a way for us both to win? Then we could use this tool to, once again, set off the conversation focused on everybody getting what they want, especially if we have difference. So here's where it goes wrong, where
Yeah.
somebody stands up in that HOA and they say, we don't care about history. We need new development. You're stuck in the dark ages. And then somebody else stands up in the meeting and says, history is everything. What's wrong with you? Development is the end of our society. And here's what we have is now we've squared off, and all we're going to do is talk about who's right or wrong.
So
if we
the
do-
solution stops happening. So without the verses, I'm hearing actual discussion when you
Yeah.
offer up this two-way commonality.
But so
Useful.
going back to the school decision, we could do it there. We could
Mhm.
say the private school versus homeschool. Is there a way? And we find out maybe the commonality is really that you just want to focus on math and reading and science or something like that.
Okay.
Is there a way to do some work at home and also some work in the private school?
Hmm.
And we know there's our hybrid programs out there that do both. But maybe we wouldn't have even considered that option. Does it have to be me versus you? It can only be all of one thing and nothing of the other thing. This tool gets us to have more creative thinking and say, maybe there is a way to do a couple days at home and a couple days in a private school setting. And maybe we wouldn't have even known that existed.
I'm also hearing the commonality is we're not asking ourselves to shift our core values. You have core values, that's okay.
Yeah.
We're talking about when we're missing the point of a similar goal because we're so hyper focused on potentially a minor difference. Because I think that what worried me originally sometimes in part of this is, does that mean I have to die to a little bit of my core value to lean into this other side? But that's, I now in this conversation, I'm being debunked. I'm glad.
Because it's not really about necessarily even changing anything that you thought. It's just about finding the commonality that's already there.
Yeah. And figuring out, is there a solution that can do those things? If you think about it, let's just simplify it and do the vacation one. Okay. So I want to go to the beach and you want to go to the mountains. And I want to do that because I want my relaxation and you want to smell fresh air and hike around or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
When you and I only look at my way or the highway, my way versus you, I miss a bunch of options that would be accomplishing both of those things.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't realize that there's this mountain retreat that's on a beach.
Mm-hmm.
That's rustic and mountain-like, or I didn't realize there was a place that had a spa that was a mountain location that might actually be able to do both things. But when I square off, I shut down my thinking. And when I shut down my thinking, my creativity's gone.
Ooh.
That is, I think, a huge,
that's
my second takeaway from all of this. The first is that we're not asking me to adjust my core value. That's not part of this. The second is that if I don't find some commonality with a relationship I want to keep, or with a coworker that we want to see a project forward on, or with a neighbor that we maybe have differences of opinion, I like that I'm being debunked on the fact that this could mean that we wouldn't be okay with difference, but we're not taking away our core value. And the second thing is that if we don't lean into finding commonality with relationships we want, then we're blocking opportunities and creativity, which is literally something we've talked about earlier this year. And the part of 2025 is let's stay curious, right? So this is being curious about other ideas in our relationships.
Yeah. And are there ideas out there that will do this?
I really like that.
Because then you focus your attention on that instead of why we're so different, or why don't you see it my way?
I want to explore doing one of these with people that are dating and want to live different places, but stay together.
Okay. An example would be a situation where somebody says, I want to live in the city and I want to live in the country.
Yeah. Okay.
So then the question would be, is there a way for you to have your slice of country and you to have your slice of city? And instead of thinking only country solutions or only city solutions, now we're thinking, is there a place where both could happen? And we're looking at other communities different than New York City or Oklahoma City.
Yeah. Yeah. What I'm walking away with is walking into conversations with a real openness and the creativity piece. Because I don't think I would necessarily, if I have a beach vacation in mind, I don't know that I would go search for mountain beaches, because that's not what I'm thinking. But like that creativity aspect of how can we find not compromising, but how can we have everyone get what you really want? And then in the openness and the discussion and talking about the commonality, maybe we'd get to the point of, I just want to be warm and you just want fresh air. So actually, Joshua Tree is great because you want to be in nature, but I just want to be warm. And that's satisfying our commonalities, but not compromising either. Is that kind of where we're going?
Good. That's really good.
I like that.
I'm also thinking, if I were to think I was going to square off with somebody and they were to start this way with me, I would feel like they want me to be heard or my desires met as equally as theirs. And so it would help me be more creative with them rather than force my opinion and what I want to say.
Yeah, 100%.
These are just really hard with a lot of areas.
I feel like my partner has used this on me, and now I'm like thinking back to conversations.
Oh, I could
where
totally
we
see him
things,
using
and
this
I'm
on you.
Oh, he is so creative. How did you come up with these things? And I get so like,
oh yeah, well, he's
faded.
listening. I can see this. I can see him doing this.
I think that could be. It sounds like him.
Yeah.
But it could sound like all of us too. Once again, thank you for joining us today. Please remember to rate, share, and subscribe to our podcast. And thank you for listening to Asking for a Friend.
Let us know what you thought of the episode. Our email is hello@afafpodcast.com. This show is for educational purposes only and is copyrighted. Written permission must be granted before syndication or rebroadcasting. Thanks for listening to Asking for a Friend with TalkDoc.